formed up in 2003. As such, he's the only person to have led both JPAC and Defense Prison War Missing Personnel Office. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Secretary Whitfield.
Good morning, everybody. I've been around and meet most of you all, and I tell you, I'm drawing energy from your smiles and from your energy. As always, it's a great day to be in the service of this wonderful nation, and it's a great day to be a part of this most noble mission. I have 4 goals for us. 4 goals for the team that's here today. The first one is, at the end of the day, I'm hoping that you all are going to be able to say, I'm sure glad I came. The second thing I'm hoping you're going to be able to say is, those were the friendliest government people I've ever met. The third thing I'm hoping you're going to be able to say is, they treated me with the utmost dignity and respect. And the fourth one is a bit challenging. That is, I'm hoping you will be able to say they were able to answer my questions, and if they could not, they gave me a timeline on when they were going to get back to me. Those are our goals. I have a simple task up here this morning, and that is to introduce our guest speaker, our keynote speaker. And as we were looking around, we said, who is the right person for this particular mission? We looked at the President of the United States, and we said, maybe. We looked at senators, congressmen, we said, possibly. And then we started looking through the military ranks, and we think we came up with the perfect solution. In fact, this gentleman and I have a connection. You see, he's a Marine, and I had a chance to spend a year with the Marines at Quantico in a Marine command in Georgetown College. So let me just tell you his name and then tell you a few things about him. You all probably have a bio of him somewhere in your packet, so I will not read the entire bio. Again, his name is Brigadier General Russell A. Sanborn. Let me just talk a little bit about this individual. And I'm just going to use phrases, and I think they're going to capture the essence of the man and the essence of this great Marine. The first thing is, he is a University of Florida Gator. That's pretty cool. The second thing is, he is, as I've already stated, a Marine. Hoorah! That's better said. I probably leave you up there with Mike. You probably say that a little better than I can. It's all good. He's also the Director of Marine and Family Programs. That's another connection that we have, because he is a part of the accounting community. You see, when you take a look or you meet the Marine Service Casualty Officer here today, there's several of them, they work for General Sanborn. Next point I want to make is that he is an aviator. Now, us ground pounders will always say, we will not hold that against him. But I got to tell you, the Marines do a good job at supporting their ground forces. He's a war fighter and a war veteran. What's more important to this morning, he is a former POW. So let me just run down a few of his decorations. He has a Defense Superior Service Medal. He has a Legion of Merit, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, the Meritorious Service Medal, among many others. Ladies and gentlemen, he is, in fact, an American hero. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker for the day, Brigadier General Kenneth Russell A. Sanborn.
Good morning. I'm not really sure I can live up to that, but thank you very much. I have to put on my cheaters here. First of all, I'd just like to say what an indeed pleasure and an honor it is to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. When the invitation came to me, in my position, obviously you get a lot of opportunities to speak at different occasions. And when my team came to me and started out with, hey, we'd like you to speak at this organization, at this meeting, I said, stop. Yes, no matter when, Doesn't matter what time, how long, or whatever, because of obviously the background that I have, almost a kindred spirit with those that are in this room. So before I even get started, let me just explain a little bit, first of all. Yes, I was a POW, a very short time. In Desert Storm, my airplane got shot down by a surface-to-air missile. And for 26 days, I was a POW in Iraq. Now, my story's not that spectacular. Obviously, I got released. I'm back here, and I'm still serving in the Marine Corps. But the more important part of this is my family side of it, my wife's side. And really, she should be the one that should be standing up here talking to you today, because she's the one that understands. Because what happened to me is very similar to your stories. Although again, mine is 30 days, some of you 60 plus years. To me, that is just unbelievable, and just says a lot about who is in this room. So for 30 days, my wife was told, your husband went on a mission. He was shot down, we believe, but we can't prove that. We have no idea. He basically went on a combat mission, never came home. We didn't see him on TV. The Red Cross doesn't know if he's alive or dead. And so for the next 30 days, she felt, and my family felt, the way that you feel. Just the unknown. I just want closure. I just want to know what happened. And so, therefore, I feel that it's important that I come here and that I talk to each of you and that I express my desire, both as a professional, what my bill is, like you heard, is my job is I'm a part of the Marine Corps service casualty repatriation part of it. But this is a bigger organization, just the Marine Corps, right? You have all the services. You have the Department of Defense. You have the entire United States government applying resources and people and talent to try to do what they did for me, to bring closure to each and every one of you. And to me, what I have observed, and by the way, I should also tell you this, I'm only 2 weeks into my job, literally. I just came from Stuttgart, Germany, where I lived for 2 years as the Deputy J3 for UCOM. So for 2 weeks, I'm in this new job, and I'm just now scratching the surface about the tremendous amount of energy and effort that our government puts forward trying to find 8,400 missing persons and to bring closure to that. And I just want to say my hat's off to Hattie Johnson, who I met fairly recently, obviously, who works for me. And she is telling me the human side of the job that we have. It is technical. There is policy implications. There is trying to coordinate all these organizations and making them all work efficiently. But the story she tells me is just absolutely amazing. And I tell her she's doing God's work. And I tell her every day, thank you for being a part of my team. And I know that the Army and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the OSD department has similar people that are applying not just their professional part of it, but they're applying their human capital part of it. And to that, I thank you for those that are serving the families out there to do what we are doing. So again, I'm just here to tell you, thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of that. Thank you for letting me lead this team, and so that we can get on to the business that we have here. Because we honor the dutiful sacrifice of the servicemen of each and every one of you and what you did for our country 60 years ago. You know, the United States government is doing everything possible to bring them home. I learned in this short time in my job that there are over 74,000 missing from World War II, 8,400 missing from about the Korean War, 1,600 that are missing from the Vietnam War. We promised that we would bring each and every one of them home, that we would bring closure to them. I've heard from Hattie Johnson, the person that I talked about earlier today. She told me about First Sergeant Humphrey, who in September of 1918, a Marine that was killed, they declared him missing. They buried him somewhere in France. but they really didn't know exactly where. And they had maps, and they tried to go locating, but back then technology wasn't there, the resources weren't there. So then she tells me that a Frenchman, I guess he was hunting, found a potential gravesite or found some artifacts. And so the United States government applied all their resources, and they go forward and they excavate and they find more evidence and more artifacts and teeth and bones and the whole 9 yards that she tells me about it. And the bottom line is that over 100 years ago, this soldier, this Marine died, and they finally found it, and they brought it to closure, and they interned it there at Arlington. And I'm thinking, wow, 100 years, and we don't quit, and we didn't give up. Imagine that attitude for a Marine, or a soldier, or an airman, or anybody in combat. I know, and I've done it 5 times, where I go shoot, and they shoot back at me. But I know that if something was to happen to me, my government will not leave me behind. Yes, it's going to be tough, and Korea is a particularly tough area, because since, 2005, basically North Korea shut us down. And that's politics, and that probably sticks in your craw as much as it sticks in mine, because this is a humanitarian effort, and we think we should be above that. But sometimes politics does get in the way, and we'll overcome that. But what that tells me, though, is that we'll work through that, and that I personally, and my soldiers and my Marines personally know that we're not going to be left behind. And that will motivate you. That will keep you going. That will keep you fighting. Trust me. We know that the overwhelming majority of the remains are in North Korea. We thought in 2011 that North Korea would finally get some breakthrough, but because of their attitude, their belligerence, using nuclear testing and rocket launches, that was put on hold. The Korean War is not a forgotten war. I have 5 kids. I have an oldest son that is currently at the United States Naval Academy. I have an oldest daughter who's at the United States Air Force Academy. I have 3 children that still live with me, 3 girls, 16, 14, and 12. The reason I tell you that is because my children want to serve. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Your family members, 60 years ago, also served in a country that we really didn't know that much about, but they still went and did something great for their country. And that same thread, that same character is in the people that serve today. And I just think that is a tremendous, I wish I could take our blood and inject it in all of America and have that same attitude. In the Korean War Memorial, it says on there, our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country they never knew and a people they never met. That's powerful words. So I take my 5 kids when we lived here before we went to Stuttgart, Germany, and the most beautiful thing to do, if you haven't done this, and you got to time it just right, at the Korean War Memorial. It's an awesome memorial. There's the 19 statue soldiers. The best time to go is early in the morning after a fresh snow has fallen, when there's no footprints and no other people have gotten there. So you got to get up early. But a fresh snow, and you walk there and you take your kids there, you'll make a powerful impact on them. Just looking at that, telling your family, this is what it's all about. This is what America's all about. People that are willing to help other people, and sometimes willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. So I'd like to just say that I remain hopeful with the progress in our discussions about repatriation and recovery of all your loved ones. You have my appreciation, and I thank you for your sacrifices. I ask that you, just like Mr. Winfield said, please engage our people out there. Have them answer your questions. Don't go away with something, a question unknown. Don't let the bureaucracy get in your way. That is our job, is to bring closure to this. You are just as much as heroes as your servicemen that sacrificed for us. And I thank you for being supportive. I thank you for carrying the torch. And I thank you for being a part of America that I'm truly blessed to be a part of and serve in this country. So thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.
Before I retired a few years ago, one of the jobs I had was the Commanding General of U.S. Army Cadet Command. The organization is responsible for commissioning 80% of all of our new Army lieutenants each year. And that's through ROTC OCS. So we commissioned them all except one that came out of the academy. Our headquarters was located at Fort Monroe. And very close to Fort Monroe was a veterans hospital and a veterans home. And on weekends, we would dress up in our civilian clothes, of course. We would gather our bingo machine and rolls of quarters for the wards, swing by a place. I can't tell you exactly where because you might want to go there and get donuts and coffee. But we would go by there and get loaves of coffee and donuts, and we would show up there. And what was powerful about that event was we got to listen to the stories and the acts of valor from our military men and women from World War II, from the Korean War, and from the Vietnam War. And what we came away with was an appreciation of the commitment and the sacrifices that had been made by those who had gone before us. On one occasion, the director asked if I would say a word or two to the veterans. He said it was nearing the holiday season, and that was a special, difficult time for our veterans. They tended to get depressed. So naturally, I agreed. And I walked to the front of the activities room, and I asked, "Do you know who I am?" And the place was quiet, just as it is here. So I'm thinking, maybe they didn't hear me. So I ratcheted up my vocal cords a little bit, and I asked again, "Do you know who I am?" Finally, a very small gentleman sitting all the way in the rear in a wheelchair, who I later discovered was a World War II veteran, raised his hand. So I'm thinking, that's mighty polite of him. He yelled up. He said, "Hey, mister, I don't know who you are, but if you go to the front desk, I'm sure they can tell you." We absolutely have to appreciate and love our veterans. It's been 68 years since the end of World War II. They were called the Greatest Generation. Are there any World War II veterans present here today? If you are, please stand. They are in fact dying off very rapidly. Last month, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the signing of the armistice that ended the Korean War. 60 years. Are there any Korean War veterans with us today? If you are, please stand. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. In 2012, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Vietnam War. Are there any Vietnam veterans? Here we go. Please stand. Are there any veterans that served in this great military since 1975? If so, please stand. You all paved the way for us. You ensured that we continue to enjoy this way of life. Thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you on behalf of a very gracious government and all of its people. All of the government representatives that you see here today are a part and make up a tapestry, if you will. You see, we're integrated together sort of like the pieces of a puzzle. And I'm going to spend a little time talking a little bit about how we actually work together to make this work for us. You see, there have been millions of young men and women who have answered our nation's call to duty over the years. And we honor their commitment and their sacrifice every year during Veterans Day, 11th of November. And since World War II, there are a little over 83,000 service members who sacrificed and then made it back home. And we honor their sacrifices, the ultimate sacrifice, every year on Memorial Day. And that's important to us all. What I want to do today is to share a story with you, a very touching story, a true story. And I want to use that story to demonstrate and explain to you how all of the members of this great community, that county community, work together. More than 700 civilian and military personnel that work this mission full-time, day in and day out. And what's even more important is that there are thousands, literally thousands of others who work this great mission. The individual that we want to talk about is Kenneth Roy Block, Corporal, United States Army. He has an interesting story. You see, he was a part of my company, of the 31st Regimental Combat Team. Most of you might know that in an organization as Task Force Faith. It was commanded by Don Faith, Medal of Honor, for his heroics during the Chosin Reservoir battles. During that fight, and this was in 1950, on the 27th of November, the Chinese launched a surprise attack, a massive surprise attack on 31st. In 2 days, they fought. The casualties started mounting. And it was at the end of that second day that they determined that they had to reconsolidate and reestablish their perimeter. And for the next 2 days, they continued the battle. And they were able to accomplish that particular mission, to reestablish their perimeter. But the attacks continued, serial after serial, and wave after wave of Chinese soldiers coming into that position. It was then determined that they had to conduct a withdrawal, a fighting withdrawal, if you will, back to the lines where the Marines were currently holding. In the course of that fight, we were losing more and more men. Once they were extracted back to the Marines' lines, the fighting continued. And then it was determined that they could not hold that position as well. Wave after wave. Again, casualties were mounting. It was at that point that the determination was made that they needed to withdraw. But before, Task Force Faith had challenges getting back. And it was because they had a large number of wounded. They loaded them all up in trucks, and they began trying to break their way through the lines. the Chinese lines, the roadblocks. There was an effort launched with an armored and infantry force to try to break through to get to them, but it was unsuccessful. So as they inched their way back, the Chinese would go down the line throwing grenades into the trucks full of wounded. And it was at that point the men decided that we need to break up into small groups and try to get back to friendly lines. They did that. Some found cover in a local village. Others attempted to cross the frozen reservoir. We think it was at that point in time that Corporal Block was killed. The fight continued. And that fight continued through the early part of December. And then the NATO forces came in, reinforced, and then they started conducting a fighting withdrawal from the area. Again, casualties were mounting. We left numerous men forward in their forward positions. We could not go back to get them because that territory was occupied by enemy forces. But now there was a new situation. The withdrawal had begun. There were very few trucks, and the choice had to be made by the leader to either take back the wounded or to take back the dead. The leadership decision was to leave the dead behind and to break the wounded out. That was a tough decision. Now, to many of you, you may think that that is the end of the story. But it's not. It is the beginning of the story. You see, this mission has the highest priority in our government. And that starts with the Pope, the President of the United States. President Barack Obama, during his speech at the 60th commemoration of the signing of the armistice that ended the Korean War, stated, and I quote, "And we will not stop working until we get and give those families a full accounting of their loved ones," unquote. Now, there are 4 organizations that hold the accounting community responsible and accountable for our mission. The first one is Congress, and I know you're thinking, what have they done for us lately? I would tell you that in 2010, they passed the most significant piece of legislation as it pertains to POWMIA since 1996. They directed that the Secretary of Defense implement a comprehensive, coordinated, integrated, fully funded program to account for our missing from World War II to the Gulf War. Now, what's significant about that piece of legislation is our mission is now statute, it's law. The second piece of it is they added World War II and the Gulf War formally to our portfolio. They also directed that we increase our capacity and capability by 2015. And the last piece of that legislation was to direct us to create a case file on all of our missing. Now, we have case files on all the wars except World War II. We were just starting. A little over 73,000 are missing. We've completed 20,000. Lots of work to be done, and we continue to work at that. The second 2 groups are also very important. Our veteran service organizations and our family groups. You see, it's these 2 organizations that play what I believe is an extremely significant role. You see, the veteran service organizations, such as the American Legions and the VFW, are key proponents of veterans' rights. But more importantly, they are supporters and advocates for this mission. And they make it known to Congress, to the White House, and to DOD. They have quite a bit of sway, and they aren't afraid to use it. Family service organizations are key because it was a family organization that started this mission. In 1969, family organizations demanded that we start accounting for our missing. It was also a family organization that is responsible for the symbol that represents our commitment to our POW and MIAs, the POW and MIA flag. And today, you all have 4 powerful organizations that are absolutely key. The Korean War Families of Missing. The Coalition of Families of Korean Cold War POW and MIAs have been there for you. They were there for the Block family, the chosen few, and the Korean War Veterans Associations were there for the Block family. These organizations and this legislation ensures that we have the authority and the funding that we need to be able to do this very important mission. I mentioned that there were 4. The final one are the private citizens. And one could argue that maybe they are the most important. And the reason is because they volunteer to answer our nation's call to duty. They are the lifeline to our military. General George Washington, over 200 years ago, got it right. He said, the willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by our nation. Pretty powerful. And ma'am, you're right. It is absolutely true. In 1993, there were several organizations working towards the effort of fullest possible accounting. Congress stepped in again and they said, you know, we need to create a single organization to sort of manage all of these entities that were around the Washington, D.C. area. They established the Defense, what's called DPMO, Defense POW Missing Personnel Office. They also designated a senior civilian to run that organization called the DASD, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for POW Missing Personnel Affairs. That would be me. Dual-headed as the director and the DASD of that organization. Now, by law, DPMO and I are responsible for policy control and oversight of all aspects of POW and MIA affairs. We have a very simple mission, and that is to lead the nation's effort, or the national effort, in achieving the fullest possible accounting of our missing DoD personnel, and to inform their families and the public. We live by a shared set of values, and I think it's important that I share those with you today. The first one is commitment, followed by integrity. We also make sure that we have open communications and that we have commitment. We make the promise a reality. Integrity. We do the right thing for the right reason. Open communications. We build and foster trust with all. And finally, compassion. We honor the sacrifices of our missing and the sacrifices of their families. But we don't do it alone. There are 2 other organizations that are extremely important to this effort. The State Department, and of course, our combatant commanders. And most of you may not be familiar with combatant commanders. The DoD has divided the world up into geographical areas and assigned a combatant commander responsible for each of those. Corporal Block was lost in the Pacific AOR. And it's kind of important about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about why this is significant in a second. But what do these 2 organizations do for us? They ensure that we maintain access to the countries that we're interested in. They ensure that we have the documentation we need to be able to complete our mission. This is all critical to how we do our work. Now, I talked about the importance of Corporal Block being lost in the Pacific AOR. Well, the next organization that I want to talk about is assigned to PACOM, Pacific Command, and that's JPAC. You're going to hear from their boss tomorrow. His name is Major General Kelly McKay. He is responsible for and is the primary operational arm for the county community. Now, DPMO has researchers, analysts, historians, investigators. The majority of this effort is all in JPAC. They have researchers, analysts, historians, investigators, recovery teams, and then they have a central identification laboratory. Very key. They're very key to making this work. And the work that they do is supported by all of the individuals that I'm going to be talking about and have talked about up to this point. Now, for us to get access, we said we want to live up to the promise that was made to Corporal Block. And in order for us to do that, we had to first get access to the country. We had to get access to North Korea. We had to get access to the Chosin Reservoir. And this work was done in earnest by DPMO and the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Mr. Affairs. And that was done in 1996. They continued to work, and it paid off about that timeline. Through policy negotiations, we got access to the Chosin Reservoir. Now that year, JPAC was able to conduct technical negotiations with the members of that country, so that we could ensure that we had the right arrangements. So we could talk about the team that we need to hire from their population. Talk about the details of us going in to do that work. We were able to do that work from 1996, and until I pulled out our forces out of North Korea in 2005 at the direction of President Bush. We continue to do all of that great work that's been set up by the policy side of the house, and technical negotiations. But the key players, and I alluded to them already, include our researchers, our analysts, and our historians. You see, they're like investigators working cold cases. They look for evidence that's located in pieces all over the world. What they do is probably as much an art as it is a science. And I just mentioned that there are two critical groups of researchers, analysts, and historians. Those in DPMO and those that are in JPAC. DPMO also has another set of researchers, analysts, and historians. And they are what we call JCSD, Joint Commission Support Division. They are also researchers. So how did this work for Corporal Block? How are we trying to find it? DPMO's researchers started doing oral histories. That's one of our primary roles. We started interviewing the veterans. All the veterans that served during the Korean War. We managed to find the platoon leader that was in charge of Micah. That was in charge of the platoon of Micah. And he talked a little bit about Corporal Block, how great of a soldier he was, and all the work he did in the Northern Platoon. That gave us a lot of what we needed. But we continued to interview all of the witnesses, and we got the one piece of information that changed the course of the history for the Block family. Someone took a picture of the area where they dug a shallow grave, a mass grave, inside that perimeter. And this became very powerful. You see, we do something called scene comparison. The area that it looks like then, the area now, and we were able to do an awful lot of work to make that work for us. We continue to get more collaboration to say, you know what? We think we can find that grave. And then it's time to bring on another team, the investigators. Now they have a unique role. The investigators are very unique because they are going to go to the site. And they are also going to talk to local officials, talk to veterans that were there, and also they're going to do an archaeological survey of the area. We again had an event that changed the course of this particular effort. Now, I failed to mention that there was another group of individuals that started earlier. You'll hear more about them in a second. And those were our service casualty officers. You probably saw that top up on the screen. They are key because they went out and started looking for family reference samples and determining who the primary next of kin was. So what was the breakthrough we had? While we were working there, a farmer came up and said, I know where that grave is. And he was able to assist us in pinpointing the exact site. So the investigators have done their work. They have all returned back to their home station in Hawaii. And it was time for the recovery teams to go to work. Again, these are the individuals that are going to spend day in and day out, days, weeks, months, in some of the most austere locations in the world. And they're going to recover those remains. They're led by, or co-led by, an anthropologist / archaeologist and a military lead that deals with all the logistics and so forth. They were able to find the gravesite and bring back the remains. And when we get remains, the first thing we do is try to cut samples for DNA analysis. And that's another individual that's extremely important to us, Athfield. The commander is here, and her name is Lieutenant Colonel Laura Reagan. She's also a PhD doctor. They are responsible for doing our DNA sample. Now, what's unique about this, and you'll hear a little more about it, is we couldn't find a family reference sample for Corporal Block. It didn't stop us. It did not stop us. I'll talk a little more about that when I talk about Central Identification Laboratory. Now, Athfield is located at Dover Air Force Base. And since we started this effort, they have collected over 20,000 family reference samples from our missing, families of our missing. Very key. The next organization that's important to this campaign that we have in our mission is ALCIL. ALCIL stands for the White Science Laboratory. They're located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They have over 10,000 reference samples, and they kind of tie the material evidence to the identification. They look at non-biological material evidence. Now, we didn't use them on this particular mission because we pretty much had all we needed done, dog tags. So we don't really need a lot of analysis there. But they are there to support us as well. Now, all of this work was being done in the SEAL, the Central Identification Laboratory. So they used all the evidence that came from our historians, our researchers, our analysts, our investigators, the recovery team. The information came back from Athfield. I'll tell you how that worked as well. You see, we identified Corporal Block using dental records. But then we took the DNA from the dental records, from the dental pieces, and we were able to fill in the rest of his remains, or parts of his remains, by DNA. So there was a role for this success. Now, it's not done. The identification was made. Out of the 11 men that were located in that mass grave, we were able to identify 7 today. 7 individuals. And once that information is determined and we've identified an individual, the service casualty officers go into a work. They notify the family, and they arrange the proper going home ceremony, duty, honor, and respect, which is absolutely critical. We were able to identify Corporal Block in May of 2012. And he had the proper going home ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery on August the 29th of 2012. And we worked at this from all over the world, and I just didn't mention some of the other areas that were critical to us. We spent a lot of time, our researchers spent a lot of time at NORA, National Archives and Records Center. They spent a lot of time at the National Records Center, for Personnel Records Center. They spent a lot of time talking to veterans. They spent a lot of time in foreign archives. They spent a lot of time talking to local and foreign veterans. That's where all this work done. Well, we complete this piece of the puzzle by giving some type of an answer to the families. And that is what's significant. That is our goal. When we speak about the fullest possible accounting, we're talking about giving you an answer. There is no guarantee that we're going to bring everybody back home. But what we will do is give you an answer. Yes, we can. Maybe we can. We don't think we can. And we think that that's critical. But in giving you an answer, most of you will be delighted if we can't bring them home. To give you a detailed happening, a detailed explanation of how he died and when we go into it. You see, these 700 plus men and women, full-time workers, and the thousands of others are dedicated to the folks of Baltimore County of all of our missing. In the motto of DPMO, keeping the promise. In the motto of JPAC, until they're home. And the inscription on the POW MIA flag, you're not forgotten. God bless each of you. God bless the families of all of our missing. God bless our veterans that were all represented here today, except for World War II. God bless the young men and women that are serving around the world, selflessly, to ensure that we continue to enjoy our current way of life. And God bless these United States of America.
Thanks, sir. Right now, we're going to take about a 25-minute break. We're back here at 10:20. Then we're going to kind of start the policy overview. First, kick off with Mr. Jack Paul, Mr. Rockhart from DPMO, and they're going to give you a big policy run. So come back here, 10:20. The pumpkin and pastries are you paid for, so please enjoy them, and see you in 20 minutes.